There is a higher version of you that is operating in a higher state of consciousness, and that is what you call the higher self. And a lot of people are disconnected from their higher self whilst operating from their ego. The ego is what keeps you in the low negative frequencies. The ego is where all your negative fear-based thinking comes from. And so most humans are operating from their egos, their negative fear-based thinking, and they're disconnected from their higher self. So in this video, I'm going to explain what the higher self is, and I'm going to share different ways you can connect to your higher self so that you can start channeling higher information, intuitive guidance, wisdom, and clarity that will help you in life. It will help steer you in the right direction with whatever it is you're wanting to do. And I have a cool wee diagram here to show you how this works. So, I didn't come up with this diagram, by the way. I saw this on Google and I thought this is a really great visual to use to explain this. So firstly, this is the body and the mind, the spacesuit for reality. Because you are not the body or the mind. You're the spirit or soul that comes from the spirit world into physical reality. And in order to come into physical reality, you need the spacesuit. So the body and the mind, the spacesuit for reality. Now here we have the ego. The ego is the false self. Now the ego is important in order to have the human experience. Because as a soul, as a spirit, we're all connected as one. There's the law of one, right? So we're all connected as one. But in order to have the human experience, to come into physical reality, we must have an ego, because the ego gives us the illusion of separation. It's what allows us to be an individual. Your ego is your identity. It's who you are. But it is the false self. So when you die, like when I die, Laura will no longer exist. That's the end of the ego, because it's the false self. However, my soul will live on. My soul will leave the body, go back to the spirit world, and probably end up incarnating into another body and have another life. Now, we have a rain cloud above the ego, because like I said, the ego is where all your negative, fear-based thoughts come from. It's what keeps us in low frequencies. It causes us to have negative thoughts of victim mindset, self-doubt, telling us how we're not good enough and why we're not good enough. It all comes from the ego, which is part of the mind. And that's why there's a rain cloud with a little sad face. As long as we listen to our egos, it's going to steer us the wrong way in life and cause us to create problems in our life. It'll self-sabotage us. And this is why awareness is the key. For me, being aware of what the ego is, what the higher self is, and learning to differentiate the two is what's improved my life. Because I know when it's my ego talking to me, I know when it's my higher self talking to me, and so I can choose not to listen to my ego and listen to my higher self instead. The ego is also a cluster of programs with limited consciousness. So as long as you operate from the ego, you're going to be operating in a limited state of consciousness, and the ego likes to keep us small. You know, like I said, it's where all our thoughts of how we're not good enough comes from. And humans are basically like a computer that runs on programs. So both the mind and the body run on programs. The ego is what runs on the program. All those thought patterns that run in your mind are just a program, and you can change that programming. When you change the programming to be more positive and to serve you in order to get the results you want in reality, that is when reality starts shifting. So this is the ego, the false self, the cluster of programs with limited consciousness where all your negative fear-based thinking comes from. And then over here we have the higher self. The higher self is the true self. And it's connected to your spirit or soul. So like I said, when I die, Laura will no longer exist. That's the false self. And I go back into my true self, my true form. And your higher self is connected to your soul. Your higher self is when you're operating from your heart. So you see, the ego's the mind, higher self is the heart. And most people don't actually realize that your heart has more intelligence than the brain. Your heart was developed in the womb first. Your heart has its own neurons, and it has a way bigger and a way more powerful electromagnetic field than that of the brain. And like I said, like most people are operating from their egos whilst disconnected from their higher self. Most people are operating from their minds whilst disconnected from their heart. Most people are sitting up here and not down here. And when you start sitting down here, this is when life gets better, because you're operating from your soul and your higher self. And see, the higher self has a happy face, because this is where all your positive perspectives, wisdom and clarity that makes you feel really good, and it pumps you up and inspires you. That's where it comes from, the higher self. And you can connect to your higher self so that you're channeling information from your higher self every day with whatever it is you're wanting to do in your life. If you've got problems and you're not sure what to do, the higher self will bring you the answers. So you have this inner guidance system that has all the answers. You know, like you go to your friends asking for advice, and that's great, but you don't actually need to, because the answers are already within you. It's learning to connect to the higher self, learning to differentiate it from the ego, and learning to trust it. That's the other step, is actually trusting the information from the higher self. Sometimes the information from the higher self comes, then we get in our egos about it and we start questioning it instead of trusting it. So the key is trusting the higher self, and the more you do that, the more you will strengthen your relationship with your higher self. So I learned to differentiate these two just from trial and error. There were times my higher self brought me information, I listened, and I was so glad that I listened because it saved my ass. There were times my higher self brought me information, I didn't listen, and I regretted not listening. And so that's what taught me to get more familiar with that voice and learning to trust it. When you connect with your higher self, your thinking is instantly different. You get out of those negative low frequencies into the higher positive frequencies, and that completely shifts your perception on reality. You have a more higher perspective, a more positive perspective on reality. So I hope this all makes sense. I like the stick figure diagram because I think it's quite a simple thing for people to like just see and understand. And now I'm going to share the 4 different ways that you can start connecting to your higher self. All right, so the first way to connect to your higher self is to acknowledge your higher self. Start talking to it and acknowledge that you have one, because your higher self wants to connect to you, but it's hard to connect to you if you're not acknowledging its existence. You know what I mean? So just start talking to your higher self and ask it for guidance. If you have a problem on your mind that you're wanting help with, talk to your higher self about it, and set that intention to connect to your higher self and allow information to come through that will help you. The second step to connecting to your higher self is to get in your body. So like I was saying before, a lot of the times people are operating from their egos, from their minds, they're up in their heads. This is where you do all your overthinking. And so the key is actually getting your awareness out of the head and grounding it in the body. When you are out of the head, out of the ego, you're grounded in the body, you're more tuned into your heart. That is when you can start receiving information from your higher self. So I'm going to share some practices that you can use that will help you to get in your body. The first one is meditation. So meditation is great because as you go into a meditative state and you close your eyes, you disconnect from the external environment, and because you disconnect from the external environment, there's less sensory information going in, and that's what causes your neocortex part of your brain to start dropping your brainwaves. And that's the key to dropping out of the ego and dropping into your heart. So as you go from beta brainwave to alpha to theta, you're aiming for theta brainwave. When you get into theta brainwave, that's when you've dropped from the ego mind to the heart. And this is when your ego goes quiet. So as you're in this meditative state, when you notice you have no thoughts, you have no thinking, that's because you've dropped out of the ego and you're sitting in your heart. That's what you're aiming for with meditation. And by doing this, it connects you to your heart, obviously, but this is when you can start, channeling information from your higher self. It's just like things will just start kind of like popping up in your internal environment, like thoughts or like a little voice that's telling you something. And, if it's positive, resonates with your soul, and it's like inspiring, like that's how you know that this information's from your higher self. And you can literally have conversations back and forth with your higher self. Like you can talk to it and it can respond, and you can actually go back and forth with it. Like I say, if you've got a problem on your mind and you're trying to figure out this problem, you can literally have a conversation back and forth with your higher self. So this is why meditation's a great practice. I meditate every day, and I love it for the fact that when you meditate and you drop out of the ego and connect to your heart, when you come out of meditation, your ego stays quiet and you are still connected to your heart for the rest of the day. So it just puts you in a really great state. The second thing you can do is mindfulness, which is getting into the present moment. When you get into the present moment, it dissolves your ego. And that is when you can start receiving information from your higher self, because as long as you're in your ego and your ego's really loud with all that internal chatter and all those negative thoughts, it's really hard to hear your higher self over the ego. The ego's louder than the higher self. So this is why it's key to get out of the ego, dissolve the ego, get in the body so that you can actually hear this intuitive guidance from the higher self. And a third tip for getting in the body is just going for a walk in nature, because going for a walk in nature grounds you in your body, which helps to quieten down the ego. Going for a walk in nature gets you in the present moment, which helps quieten down the ego. And so I've had a problem on my mind, and so I'll go for a walk in nature. I will set the intention to connect to my higher self, asking for guidance on this problem that I'm having. And then I just walk. And as I walk, just by being in nature, it just gets me more tuned into my internal environment. And then the information will just start coming up. And like I say, I'll conversate, I'll go back and forth with my higher self. And yeah, I just receive the information and then trust it. Trusting it is important because like I said, a lot of the times people may hear the information but then get in their egos and start thinking too logically about it. And yeah, so you've really got to learn to trust what your higher self is saying. And when you do trust it and you see the results, like, oh, that was so good that I listened to my higher self, then that's going to keep strengthening your connection and relationship with your higher self. Now, the third tip I have for connecting is automatic writing. So with automatic writing, it's where you're just writing and you're basically channeling your higher self. So what you do is, once again, you want to set a sincere and relevant intention, whatever it is you're wanting guidance on or help with. Set the intention. You can even write it at the top of the page. And then you just start writing whatever's coming up in your internal environment. Just write it down until you experience a breakthrough. And the signs of success that you've connected to your higher self whilst doing automatic writing, the first sign to look out for is your writing speeds up. And that's because you get into a channeled state. So you start channeling information from your higher self and your hand's trying to keep up with the information coming through. So if you notice your handwriting speed up, that's the first sign. Another sign is that the message resonates. It's positive, it's uplifting, it inspires you, it energizes you. Whenever the information makes you feel that way, that is your higher self. Because, like I said, all the negative fear-based thoughts come from the ego. So the ego is not going to give you all this positive wisdom and clarity the way the higher self does. So that's how you know if you've connected, by how the information makes you feel. It makes you feel inspired and uplifted, like, yeah, and it resonates, and this is great. That's how you know you've connected. And one other thing I noticed for me when I was doing this, I was journaling out, basically I had someone screw me over, someone that I thought I could trust that was a friend, and I was just in a negative state. I really needed to just journal it out onto paper, all the negativity that was in my internal world. So as I was journaling it out, an interesting thing I noticed was I first started writing referring to myself as I, whatever it was, I can't remember what I was writing, but it was like, I'm blah, 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 I, blah, blah, whatever it was. As my writing speeds up, because that was the first sign, I noticed that I changed to you. You, blah, 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 blah. You, like as if someone else is talking to me, telling me you should be doing this or you should do that. You know what I mean? That is how I know that it was my higher self, because it is like your higher self talking to you is almost like someone else is speaking to you. Even though it's you in a higher state of consciousness, it's just funny how it's like they're talking to you, giving you this information, and then I noticed how my writing changed to reflect that. So that's another thing to look out for. If you change from saying I, and then all of a sudden you're saying you this, you that, that's another sign. So yeah, you can literally use automatic writing, which is basically a journal session, to channel information from your higher self. Now the last one, number 4, is to follow your excitement and passion. And this I learned from Bashar. So Bashar says that excitement and passion is communication from your higher self. So whatever you're really excited about or really passionate about, maybe you really love dancing or you really enjoy creating art, that's your excitement, that's your passion, that is communication from your higher self. And whatever you're excited about or passionate about is linked to your purpose. And because of social media, we can monetize our passions. We can turn them into businesses and make money doing things that we enjoy doing. So that's what is great about social media. And those are my 4 ways you can connect to your higher self. This is something that, you practice at it and you will get better over time. Like I said, I had to do a lot of trial and error to figure out the ego and the higher self. But now I'm at the point where I know exactly which is which and who to listen to and who not to be listening to. And it will improve your life. It'll make navigating on your life's journey so much easier. So I hope you like this video and you got some sort of value. And if you did, let me know by hitting the like button or write a comment. And if you like this sort of content, hit the subscribe button and the bell notification so you can be notified whenever I drop a video. And I'm going to link another great follow-up video after this one that is also about the ego and the higher self. It goes a bit more in depth and talks about other aspects to the ego and the higher self. So if you want to learn more, I think that's a great follow-up video for you to watch. Have an awesome day. Peace.